Hi, everyone. I'm Chanel Jones. Let me see. Are we getting some feedback? I guess you can't talk back to me, so I don't know if we're getting feedback. I'm Chanel Jones, co-host of the third hour of Today, and we are making this happen. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to our Next Level Summit panel on NBC News and our news storytelling. So as journalists, storytelling influences how we write articles, produce our broadcasts, and even staff our newsrooms. And it drives everything we do, and it is always top of mind. So this session today is so important. And in this conversation, we are going to examine those choices. We're going to unravel the thought process behind them. And our panel is going to share their storytelling insights along with plenty of advice and tips. You're going to walk away with all sorts of hopefully new information to inspire you today. So let me introduce our panel. Side by side there, we have Janelle Rodriguez, NBC News Executive Vice President, and to her side, Libby Least, today Executive Vice President. We also have Joe Fryer, Morning News Now anchor. We have Mary Omatiga, NBC Sports digital writer. And we also have Elizabeth Flores, NBC 10 and Telemundo 62 Vice President. So we have an amazing panel. And at this point, to me, this is like the best of the best getting all of these folks together. So we want to encourage you. Our organizers really want this to be interactive. They don't want this to feel like you're sitting in a class with, having a lecture. So by all means, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the question box. And I will check your messages and check your questions all throughout our conversation and I'll try to get to as many as I can for all of our panelists in the Q&A tab. So be sure to do that and we'll answer those questions live. So with that said, let's dig in until we start getting some of your questions. Each of you, if you could just briefly describe your job and the work you do. Janelle, we'll start with you.
Hi, good morning. Clearly, I'm not good at tech, which is why I'm sitting in Libby's office. We're going to try and work that out. But I'm Janelle Rodriguez. I'm EVP of News Programming at NBC News. I oversee NBC News Now, Nightly News, and our Breaking News Specials team.
Yes, it's great to have Janelle next to me here. Our offices are close by, so I invited her over during the tech issues. I am Executive Vice President of Today. That includes 4 hours of a broadcast every morning. We've got our weekend broadcasts as well. I also oversee our digital site, our streaming channel, our audio shows, and all the different properties and platforms that are under the Today brand for NBC.
All right. You're not busy at all. Joe.
Hey there. I'm Joe Fryer. I am an anchor for NBC News Now. I anchor the morning show starting at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. I do Pop Start and other segments for the Saturday Today show. I'm a correspondent who reports for Nightly News Today, MSNBC, and News Now. And then I teach a monthly storytelling class for NBCU Academy.
Sounds good. Mary.
Hi, my name's Mary Omatiga. I'm a writer for digital at NBC Sports, and a big picture, my role is to really just get people excited about all of NBC Sports properties, and that kind of falls into two buckets. The first is SEO writing, where I use Google Trends and analytics to write articles in anticipation of what people are searching for, and those articles are loaded with different storylines and answers to common questions about all of our events. And the other bucket is through feature stories and athlete interviews, where I'm getting our viewers excited for our events by helping them get to know the athletes better and sharing their stories. So my role is really to not only tell people how to watch, but why they should watch, and to give them a deeper glimpse behind the veil of who they're watching.
That's good. I love that. All right, Elizabeth.
Very cool. Hi, everyone. Good morning. So I am the Vice President of News for NBC 10 and also Telemundo 62. I oversee, and this is in Philadelphia, by the way, I oversee the overall vision and strategy for both newsrooms. But I like to think I'm really responsible in keeping my team motivated and passionate about the important work that we do.
I love that. So let's dig in here and start talking about storytelling and reporting through your lens. So Janelle, or Libby, or Joe, we'll start with you guys. Why do you think storytelling is such a vital skill for journalists, and how is it different from, let's just say, simply reporting information?
I would love to hear from Joe Fryer because he is a master storyteller at NBC, and I'm sure me and Libby can.
I will, yeah. Since we're going to brag on Joe really quickly, Joe and I graduated from Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism back 23 years ago in 2000. And hands down, Joe was the best writer in the class of 2000, if not the whole time we were there. So, Joe, yes, you get to answer this question about why you think storytelling is such a skill and why it's so vital and what makes it different from reporting information.
Yeah, first of all, go Cats, Chanel. And it wasn't 23 years ago. I think Chanel and I graduated 7 years ago. If I'm not mistaken,
exactly.
7 years ago. It was much more recent. You know, I think, you know, we are obviously in the information business. So first and foremost, our job is to get the right information, get it out there as quickly as possible, and communicate that to people. But it's also helpful, especially if you're working in anything that deals with video, television, streaming, to tell it in a memorable way. If you don't convey information in a memorable way through the tools of storytelling, people aren't probably going to retain that information, and they may also not come back to get their information from you. I actually test this out every month in the workshop I do with NBCU Academy. It's a little spoiler alert for those who take the class. I show a story, and it's a story that's filled with information. And I ask people what they think about it, and they seem to like it. They say, yeah, that was a good story. And then I literally quiz them on the story, and they fail. And it's because the story was not told in a terribly memorable way. It was just a lot of information. And this is like, these are news people watching my workshop, not being distracted by making dinner or helping the kids with homework or all the things that families are dealing with while they're trying to consume us. And the simple fact is, if you give people too much information and you don't present it in a way that has heart or humor or memorable characters or creative writing, they're simply not going to retain it. And so what we'll talk about here for the next hour is ways that we can tell stories in a way that people actually remember them and will want to come back and continue to get information from you.
I love that.
I always find, Janelle, I was going to add to that, I always find from the Today Show perspective, especially, Joe mentions the character. So, you know, we always say that the storytelling makes reporting interesting and the characters make the storytelling interesting. So we spend a lot of time looking for the best character to tell the story, or sometimes you don't look for the best character. The best character is the story, and that makes it the story. So I can just say for sure, anytime we're sitting in a control room and a piece airs, a lot of times it's Joe Fryer's piece, of course, but after the piece, you remember who the character was in the story and the interaction with the reporter, and their ability to tell their own story. I think of, you know, this isn't necessarily a character, so to speak, but we had a really big interview this week with the Virginia teacher that was shot by the 6-year-old. Savannah Guthrie had it as an exclusive, and she was just a completely compelling interview. She told the story firsthand and recounted it in a very brave way. And that is storytelling at its best. Savannah doing that interview, having the questions that set her up to guide her through the interview and have her tell her own story. And I think that's what makes for compelling TV.
And Janelle, how do you know it's good storytelling when you hear it? Like, what is it about that piece that makes you go, ooh, that was a good one?
I mean, I think Joe mentioned a couple of the things. Of course, a great person at the heart of the story, right? People relate to people over just a barrage of information, right? And I think part of that is also what differentiates written storytelling versus visual storytelling, which is what we do on TV. I mean, both of them are a craft unto itself, but for visual storytelling on television, it's either the very memorable person who is the, you know, heart and soul of the story, or, you know, great writers, great journalists aren't just giving you the who, what, when, and where, and why. There's always that really interesting detail. Let's say it's an earthquake somewhere and they're describing the scene, and they pick up the child's blanket that was found in the rubble. You're going to remember the child's blanket that was found in the rubble. And more junior reporters, I can kind of skip over that and will tell us 10,000 people were dead, 500 houses collapsed, you know, whatever it might be. The great journalists are going to pick up on those little details that really connect you emotionally to the story. And I think that emotional connection is when you know you've had great storytelling or humor, even, you know, to Joe's point, and knowing where, you know, that evocative turn of phrase is going to elevate something that might be a little bit more straightforward.
Elizabeth, you oversee a bilingual newsroom. How do you take the same story and tell it in a way where it resonates with your English and Spanish speaking audience?
Yeah, so I mean, Janelle hit it on the head, Joe, Libby. It is about the heart of the story. So it's about the heart of the story. And being in a bilingual newsroom, when you tell the story in two languages, it's still about the person. It's still about the character of the story. So it resonates in both languages because of that. It's because of who are you telling the story, who's the lens that you're looking at it through. So I always tell my journalists, find the heart, make me connect with the person or animal or whatever. Just make sure that it is not robotic. And, at the end of the day, when you tell a story about a person and you really find a way to have us connect with that person and be able to relate, it resonates. It doesn't matter the language that it's in. And that's really what I hone and I really try to get folks to understand in our newsroom, that it's not a Spanish or English story, it's a human story.
Absolutely. Mary, let me bring you in here. Can you talk about some keys to great sports storytelling?
Yeah, for sure. So great storytelling connects people to athletes they've never met before and makes them feel like they were part of that journey all along. I think great sports storytelling also takes viewers to a place that they've never been before and kind of gives them a better understanding of that place or topic. So really big picture, I think it's digging deeper and paying attention to those small details that really make someone's story hit home. But it's also making sure that you're paying attention to kind of a couple of things that really apply to all areas of storytelling, not just sports, and that's accuracy. You can have a really enticing story, really compelling story, but if the facts are wrong, then you lose all credibility and it doesn't matter. So you really need to make sure that what you're reporting is correct. Fairness, you want to make sure that the subject of your story is being treated fairly. Context, giving those small details that tell the complete picture of the story. Clarity, concise, making sure the story that you're presenting is digestible. I feel like our editorial team at NBC Sports really prioritizes all of those things in all that we do.
I love that. Okay, so I want to get into some of the questions that we're getting. We promised to make this interactive. So we have one from Amber Land. She's from Texas Southern University. She's watching. She submitted this question. She says, what are the top 3 elements that make up a great story? I like this. They're taking notes. All right, top 3 elements that make up a great story. Anybody want to start? And you don't all have to weigh in, but
I'll start quickly. I think 3 things to remember are, as we mentioned, find the heart of the story. And even though, yes, it's, it is important to always answer the W's, the who, what, when, where, why, because those are definitely the building blocks of stories. And then the last thing is keep it simple. I think sometimes people get too caught up in a long, it depends, right, on how you're, what storytelling you're doing, whether it's long form or short form. But really keep it simple. Don't get bogged down on making it too flowery. But those are the 3 things I would say to remember.
Joe, what do you think? Top 3 elements that make a great story.
We've talked about 2 of my 3 already. Libby mentioned character. That's my number 1. And these are the people who bring heart and humor to stories. Janelle mentioned my number 2, which is great writing and memorable writing. My number 3 is moments. So what are moments? They're the reveals in the story. They're the surprises. They're those moments of emotion that we have. They're the things that we sort of build to in great feature stories. There's big and small. Big ones maybe come later in the story. Smaller moments are peppered throughout. I think if you're watching the Today Show, you're seeing moments every day in the way the anchors interact with each other, the way they interact with a live guest. Sometimes what's harder is when you're actually out in the field shooting. How do you get moments? And one of the most important things I tell people if you're out shooting a story is leave time to spend with the characters you're profiling. Don't get in a place where you finish your interview and say, okay, we need that shot of you walking down that hallway awkwardly toward the camera and me telling you what to do. The moment you start telling people what to do, like, hey, go around this corner, put that clipboard down, pick it back up, they're going to stop being natural at all. They're just going to want instructions from you. What you want to do is finish an interview, clip a mic on someone, back off and get them in their setting and let them do their thing. And that's where you start to collect moments when people actually start to feel like they can be themselves. I love collecting moments. I love little laughs that people have. I love little moments where they might get a little emotional with someone. I just love when we can sneak back and sort of capture their life without them even sometimes realizing we're doing it.
It's such good advice. And what Joe does well, I will say, is it's almost like what we call the golden nuggets, where sometimes people will put all of their good stuff, so to speak, or they tell you the whole story right at the beginning. And then from there, it's just kind of going down until you finish it. But when you can have someone where they have different things they want to tell you. So first they tell you this is happening, and then they tell the story, and then they say, and then this is also part of it. And you say, oh, it's like golden nuggets all throughout the piece. So you have a thread where you're constantly engaged, even if it's just a 3-minute piece. And I also think too, especially for reporters, and I know, let's say I get an assignment for the 6:00 news, and you guys know how it goes. They don't call you back and you don't get it finished, or you don't get out on the road until 3. So you kind of pre-write it. So that way, when you get back, all you have to do is just plug in the sound bites into what you've already written. That can work, but you're really cheating yourself, especially if you have a good character. And so I think sometimes you have to let go of that formula that you have in mind before you get there, and let the person actually help you write the story by what they're saying, because otherwise you get into this routine just to get your stories done, right? Where it's soundbite, track, soundbite, track, soundbite, track, I'm done. And you do that night after night, and then you look back and you really don't have anything that you feel like is a keeper for your reel. And I just remember that being the case. Let's go to some other questions here from some of you. This is a good one. This is from Kevin Palomino. He says, how can we make traditional news storytelling compelling for younger audiences?
Well, I'll start with that. We spend a lot of time thinking about that in our Today Show space. We have a core audience that's been with us for many, many years and followed the show loyally. And we often talk about that's a really great core audience to have, but how are we reaching younger people? How are we packaging our content in a way that appeals to younger people? And I think some of that is tapping into that generation within the newsroom, within our reporting set, tapping into that generation that can tell the story in the way they think they would like to receive it. So we spend a lot of time talking to the younger people on the staff, including them in meetings, thinking about how do you take that great interview and chop it up on TikTok? Maybe that's something that's interesting and just bits of things that might be compelling to watch in that TikTok space. But we have to think, I think we're going to talk about this coming up, but the diversity of viewpoint includes that sort of age diversity, which is not only thinking about it in terms of our own little worlds, but thinking about it, across the spectrum of demographics. And it's hard because oftentimes when you're kind of the editors of a show, or, you have a lot of experience, 20 years in news, for instance, but you're not necessarily speaking to the younger audience. So we spend a lot of time thinking about that.
That's good.
Yeah,
Anyone else?
Libby, and just to add on to that, I think that the key elements of storytelling don't have to change, but it's just a matter of making sure that the way that you're presenting the information is digestible and appeals to the younger audience. So I'm glad that you mentioned things like TikTok and social media. It's still having that great and compelling story, but just figuring out, how can I have this serve on a platform like Instagram? How can I incorporate this into Snapchat or whatever everyone is using?
Yeah, I'll jump in here as well. When we launched News Now, it was the first time I was ever able to work in a situation where we weren't bound by traditional structures, right? Working at the network, working in cable, there's a certain formula. And while you can tweak around the edges and do story selection that might appeal to younger folks, you're still kind of within a traditional format, right? We're not all of a sudden on nightly news going to turn it into a 22-minute interview show or, quick little 30-second capsules, right? Nightly is what nightly is, and we can do incremental changes, but starting something from scratch. A couple of things that I learned, really leaning to Libby's point on a lot of the younger folks in the newsroom, they don't come to it with the same track sought version of storytelling, right? They have a really interesting, I think, organically interesting visual style that they have brought to the table, and really, for at least News Now, have become kind of a defining voice of how we tell stories. And I think it's a misnomer that a lot of people think that young people want it fast and have no attention span, and everything's got to be broken down into either social media clips or 30 seconds. But what we have really found through trial and error is that young people are interested in the news, and they also want depth. Not all the time. Not every story should be 4 minutes or 5 minutes. But if they're in and you're telling a great story in a really interesting way, they're not changing the channel. And I think that's a misconception amongst, our news executives collectively, is that people want it really, young people want it really fast. They want it very surface. We don't find that to be the case. We think depth really works in this format. But also, the couple of things that I'm always telling our correspondents and also our show producers, it's got to be really interesting, really important, highly relevant, or super visual. And ideally, it's all four of those things, but it's at least got to be two of the four. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, why are we doing this story? And I think that is particularly resonates with people of all ages. But the other thing I think that is particular to younger audiences is a demand for a certain level of relaxed relatability, as opposed to like, I am an anchor, I am a reporter, I'm not letting you in on the process. So even our correspondents who do appear on Nightly in other places where they have to be a little bit more formal, because that's the expectation of that audience there, on News Now, the ask of our anchors, of our correspondents is, let us in, tell me how you got this story. Let the audience know what the process was. Let them know, those little nuggets behind the scenes, but drop the air of formality. Talk with the audience and not at them. And I think that's a super key component for connecting with younger audiences.
That's good. We have some great questions. I'm looking here. There are questions about diversity and the craft of it. So let me try to zoom in here and get more of these questions. So several questions about diversity. So we have one from Daya Mehta. She asks, what do you think is the role of diversity in crafting what is newsworthy?
I think it's everything. I'll just jump in here. I think you have to have a diverse newsroom. You have to have a diverse reporting group. You have to have a diverse amount of anchors if you want to be good. And that's a full range of diversity, meaning geographic diversity, education diversity, socioeconomic diversity, all of the things, because we all have our blind spots, right? You come to the table with your own experience, and you don't know what you don't know. And to have a colleague sitting across the newsroom going, I know why this story is really important and it's really relevant, and there's an audience out there that is hyper focused on this. We've got to do this story. If that's not within your experience, you need somebody else in the newsroom to be able to tell you that. So to me, it's fundamental. If you want to be a great newsroom, you have to have people with different experiences to come to the table. And that includes religious experience, age, I really think of it in the full range of what that means.
Yeah, Janelle, just to add to that, we obviously have diverse audiences, so it's incumbent on us to have diverse storytellers, and it's critical to our coverage. We obviously don't want the same story told by the same person in the same way throughout a broadcast. So the whole mission is to invite as many as we can to the table, pitch ideas, pitch perspectives, and think about the tale you weave throughout a broadcast. At least that's how I look at, storytelling on today, which is making sure that we've got different rhythms to the show and different perspectives to the show. And that makes it interesting. And it also appeals to a variety of different audiences, which is what we want to do.
And I think when we do that, the show flies, and it feels good and it feels right. I think about the third hour, for example, of today. Yeah. You have Al Roker. He's in his 60s. He's African-American. So am I. So is Craig. But we're different. Craig lives in Connecticut. He's from South Carolina. He has an interracial marriage. He has interracial children. Dylan is from New Jersey, proud New Jersey, and then I come from the Midwest and lived in Philly. So it's when we all bring kind of our journeys and what we've lived through and our life experiences, when we all bring that together and we sit down at the table, we can take the same topic and approach it from a different perspective. And it's magic. I can't tell you how many times my grandmother, who's 93, she'll call me after a show and she loves what Al said because she feels like she can relate to him because he's older. And then, she misses the kiddos. And so she likes to see pictures of Dylan's kids. And then she thinks Craig is, so people love it. I think when you bring a diverse group of people to a table, and I think it's almost a teachable moment without beating something down someone's throat of just how we can all get along, how we can approach the news of the day. And on that note, there's a question for me. Thank you. From Lauren Settles. She says, Chanel Jones, Philly misses you. Oh, thank you. Hi, Philly.
Miss you.
How can we make news storytelling more engaging and appealing to Black news consumers who have lost hope in how traditional news represents them? That's a very good question. I started to worry there for a while that our news was being siloed, right? So many of you guys know we'll go to the shade room, we'll go to Black Twitter, and then we'll go to more traditional news to get the traditional news of the day. And what I have felt for a very long time, which I think we're actually doing a good job at now in more recent years, is it doesn't have to be two separate places. You don't have to go over there to get your Black news and go over here to get your mainstream news. Good stories are good stories. And I think and to bring it back to storytelling, I think that transcends whether you're Black, white, yellow, or green. And I also think when your newsrooms are diverse, you end up you can't help but to have diverse coverage, right? I think of on the fourth hour, which is Hoda and Jenna. Talia is an African-American woman who supervises or seniors their show. The other day I looked up and she had an artist on that, is kind of known in African-American circles here in New York City, but I'd never actually seen her on television. And it's like, what, kudos to Talia for putting her on television. And she was fantastic. And so I think, again, when your newsrooms are diverse, you bring in maybe people that you've met at your church or your community center that or give you great story ideas. And so I think at the end of the day, our networks and our mainstream networks, if you will, are realizing that if you don't do that, not only is it not the right thing to do, it's just bad business. It's like what Libby said. I mean, your stories need to reflect the audiences where you're giving your news. So I do think we're getting better at it. And I think my last point on this is post George Floyd, I really have held myself accountable for speaking up. So if I see a story in my community that I think is worthy, or if I meet someone, I didn't even realize until we started having these conversations that before perhaps I would hold back or not want to bring up too many things or careful not to do all Black stories, if you will. I mean, those are the kind of things that we think about. Maybe we shouldn't have to, but we do. And so, but now a lot of us are just kind of unapologetic about it, and everyone appreciates it. Like if there's a story in your community or something that's happening, you can't be afraid to speak up. So I would say that. So I hope that answered your question. We have another one. Oh, we just talked about this on the Today Show today. This is from Jill Webb. She says, how do you anticipate AI tools like Chat GPT to impact news storytelling? That never even crossed my mind. I thought about like writing a college essay, or it can pick out the clothes you wear, but I never thought about it as far as how it could impact storytelling. And it says, Janelle, Libby, Joe, are you anxious or excited about these new tools?
I'm obsessed. You go.
I'm the opposite. I'm like old school. Like I'm a writer. I want to write my own things. I don't even want to think about something else possibly writing any. I'm also probably a control freak. So I've been like far more hesitant. I've never tried ChatGPT. I realize I'm going to have to. And obviously we've had discussions in the newsroom. We don't use these tools right now for what we cover because that's not ethical. We are the ones who need to generate that reporting. Also, they're not always accurate. I've been pretty skeptical. Libby, I'm fascinated to hear your thoughts on it.
I think we're kind of all over the map. I know Janelle and I have talked about this in groups here within NBC leadership, but there's some exciting parts. There's some very anxiety-inducing parts. There are things that we have to kind of put boundaries around as we go and watch. I know it's moving really fast, and it's going to continue to move fast. So we just have to stay on top of it. I think it can be both exciting and scary at the same time. And that's why it's important as news executives that we all continue to talk about these things and think about how we want to use them and make an informed decision as a group about what we think can be useful. I know Janelle's obsessed because it's kind of a cool thing. And I've tried it a little bit. I think it's okay. I feel like a Google search to me is just as good right now, but I think there's.
Wait, you tried it? Like to do what? Like to write an essay or like?
No, I just tried, just type in certain things and see what it comes up with, just to kind of test it. I haven't used it in any practical way other than just to see how it works. But Look, it's going to be with us, and we've got to study it. We've got to know how they work and what the risks and what the benefits are. So, how's that for a non-answer, Joe?
Yeah,
Janelle, why are you obsessed? Janelle,
So
I know. I'm like, somebody, Janelle, let me like, so what about it? What's the good part? Like,
I'm obsessed with the good and the bad. And I'll tell you, one of the first phone calls I made when ChatGPT first released was to the head of standards. And I said, listen, someone's going to get fired real fast. And so this is a good warning for all you, and starting out journalists out there, and even the veterans ones. If you want to do a shortcut and get your script written by ChatGPT, they may not catch you once, they may not catch you twice, but that is plagiarism. It's no difference than going to the New York Times, ripping off their reporting and then presenting it as your own. So fair warning right now, don't even think about it, because it is plagiarism. The other thing is, garbage in, garbage out. We don't know what the sourcing is for ChatGPT is. And all of the tests we've been doing, like, it spits out both good information, and it's meant to be conversational, but it also is riddled with fact errors and fact bombs. So I would treat it like in terms of a researching tool, which can be a powerful research tool, like a Wikipedia minus, right? At least with Wikipedia, which we do not consider a source around here, but it could be a starting point when you go, wait, when was this guy born and whatever, and then you go back and backtrack and make sure you verify those facts. As a research tool, again, I think it might be helpful, but you need to go back and source verify everything. You cannot take it as a source itself, because it's riddled with errors. Its job as an AI is to be conversational, not to be truthful or ethical. We just got a really incredibly mind-blowing briefing on AI from some experts, and they gave an example using Snapchat's new use of AI, where this person says, hi, I'm a 13-year-old girl. I just met a 40-year-old man online. I'm really excited because he asked to come meet me and pick me up in his car. And AI responds, oh, that's a great idea. And then she says, well, I think I'm about having sex with him for the first time. And the robot replies, you should consider you thinking about candles and flowers and all this shit. There's no, excuse my language, there's no ethical boundaries around this. And you can see, you take that example of a 13-year-old interacting with this type of thing on Snapchat, with no ethical or moral kind of boundaries set around it. You can see how this can get dangerous fast. So I'm obsessed with that. I'm obsessed with, you can use these new, these voice authenticators that use AI. They can get 3 seconds of your voice, and then you take those 3 seconds and then you spit out a whole script. So imagine grandmom gets a call from Chanel. Hey, it's Chanel. Grandmom, I'm in trouble. Can you wire me $10,000? We're going to see this in about 2 seconds, right? So that's a whole genre of story in terms of how people are going to use this to manipulate people. Your voice will never be the same as an authenticator, meaning I call you Chanel, you think it's me. You can see someone could imitate the voice of a president, a bank leader, right? You just scale out the implications. There's so much interesting, powerful things it can do, but always assume bad people are going to find every nefarious way to use it. Every state, nation state now has this because they release this publicly. So if you're a bad actor nation and you want to flood disinformation or show that. So I think both as a tool, it's really interesting. I think as a story, it will be one of the stories for the next decade or so, because the implications are just far beyond our reach in terms of, you think of all the bad things. Facebook looks so completely pedestrian and how many bad uses, right, and scams popped up with Facebook. So there's that part of it. And then the last thing I'm obsessed with is, well, I'll tell you 2 more. One, I'm planning a big trip. I leave tonight. I hadn't planned it. So I went to ChatGPT, spent 20 minutes, and it came out with a brilliant itinerary for me that was good. And it planned it down to the second of go here, go there, proximity to there. So that was amazing as a use case. But the other thing that we learned as we were getting a briefing on how to apply it for our newsrooms, everything you put into ChatGPT, you are consenting that ChatGPT owns the license. So if you're an IT person at your news division, you put in code, they now have that code. you're a filmmaker and you put in your scripting ideas because you want help with that, they now own all of that. So just remember, whatever you put in there, you're signing away a license. I would not put in any proprietary information from your newsroom. I will get off my soapbox.
Wow.
And when I said I'm obsessed.
Fascinating. It's so fascinating. This is good.
One thing, if I may add, just one thing.
Absolutely.
So what I find scary about it, I'll give you one example. So just yesterday, I'm looking at it, I'm on Instagram, you know, where everybody also gets their news, and a picture pops up of the former president being arrested. And I am like, which is AI. And I was like, what in the world? And this, I think it was World Latin Star. So instead of World Star, it was the World Latin. And I was like, what is it? I literally freaked out because I was like, what is this? Like, I'm like, did I miss something? Like, you know, obviously, you know, but for me, and I'm in this business, I had to look at it several times, and I went to my emails, push, you name it, because those are on dinner time. So that's what really scares me, is how these tools are being used by others and how believable it can be for the general public, where they're actually seeing something like this and they believe it. So I'm all for, like, I'm like Joe, I'm like old school, like, okay, you know, and I also like to look ahead at the future, and I'm willing to try new things. But this actually really does scare me a bit, because as Janelle mentioned with the Facebook and all of that, it could definitely be scary. I mean, and I'm sure many of you put your pictures, uploaded your pictures on that Lensa app just to see how cool you look and futuristic. Well, now they have all your information.
Yeah.
So, you know, it is still a little bit scary for me, at least. Janelle decided I'm scared.
It's true. I saw a memo about that yesterday and I thought, what? Okay, you guys are really, the questions are really good. Like, they're using this as almost like a masterclass in storytelling. So now we also have a lot of questions about the craft itself, which is why I love this business, because there is a craft to it. So, and we're going to zoom in and get really specific for a second for my reporters out there. And I think this is a good question. This is from Sydney Johnson. As far as the craft of storytelling, she says, how do you master getting a storytelling voice and become confident with the way you share news? That's a really good question. Joe, voice, even just your voice itself, people are still trying to figure it out. And voice with like their style. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can watch a Harry Smith piece and you know it's Harry. It's a style. Joe, he has a style. And I think when you're coming up, you're just trying to make sure you get it right, let alone a style. So they're asking about how you find that. Anybody want to weigh in on that?
I mean, I think the biggest lesson that I think I went through as I was trying to figure that out is I would find people in the business who I respected and looked up to. So anyone who knows me knows my mentor is Boyd Hooper, who works at Care 11 News, the NBC affiliate in Minneapolis. I actually worked with him for years in the same newsroom. And you can get tempted to almost copy a style of someone you like, and you want to avoid that. I think I go through periods of my life where I try to write like someone, and then you find you almost are tracking like them. And it's good to play around with things and borrow things from people, but to then find your own voice and how does it feel to tell your own stories. And I think your actual voice and how you track something will come across much more authentically if you are writing in your own voice and writing things in a conversational way, with a style that fits how you would share a story. So for me, you know, it takes some time to figure it out. I remember at first when I started in the business, I was in my first job in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And I think I used to track, I'm sure it was just horrible. I can't imagine. It was like me thinking I was being an anchor man and this deeper voice than I actually had. And there was no inflection, nothing at all. I probably sounded like a chat GPT 20 plus years beforehand. And thankfully, another reporter, the weekend anchor, grabbed me and was very candid and goes, "What the hell are you doing?" She's like, "That's not how you talk." And that was so important to me because I needed someone to kind of say, "Hey, that's not you. I want to see you." And we get so much feedback in this business where people tell us our voice has to be a certain way and our look has to be a certain way. And obviously we have to pay attention to some of that, but never ever lose track of who you are. And I think having someone candidly say that to me early in my career made a huge difference because immediately I started tracking in a much more natural, normal way.
You know, it's interesting. I'll interject here. So there are times where I travel. And so there are times where I go to smaller cities and I'll turn on the local news. And Joe is right. You know, in the beginning, you try to have what you think is a reporter voice, and you realize that, you know, it's just not who you are. And then by the time you get to, let's say, the network, and you watch folks who've been here for a while, they're just talking. And what they say is believable because they have credibility and it's who they are. So they don't have to try to sound newsy. And I have a similar story. So my journey, I was a one-man band in Springfield, Illinois. I was a weekend anchor in Tulsa, Oklahoma, then a 5 o'clock anchor in Tulsa, Oklahoma, then a morning live reporter in Philly, and then morning anchor in Philly before the Today Show. So that's kind of like my climb. And when I was in, gosh, when I say that, I'm like, ooh. So when I was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, we had a consultant come in. At the time, I was anchoring the 5 o'clock news. And I put in my little VHS tape or whatever it was. And I was so proud of it. I had my like Talbot blazer, or maybe it was Casper, my shoulder pads, my helmet hair, my hoop earrings. And I'm like, here's my VHS tape. And so I gave it to her, and it was like all of my anchoring and whatever. And I'm like, here it is. And she was like, I think I like you better. And I was like, me? I'm right. What do you mean? And she was like, I like the you here better than her. She's like, there's nothing wrong with her. Like, she can do the 5 o'clock news and she's fine. But I feel like if I could see her on the news, like, it would be even better. And I walked away not really understanding what she meant. And I said, well, I am her, and I don't understand. And she said, well, just try to give me a little bit of whatever you just gave me here on the air. And I didn't really understand it, but I let it, you know, I took it. And I remember when we got to the sports part at the end of the show, you know, you do your weather, your sports, all the good things. I think I was friends with the sports guy at the time. And I can't remember, but instead of like, so tell me how those, you know, high school students played today, or whatever the team was, I said something like, did you see the slam dunk that such and such, such and such? I mean, the crowd went crazy, or whatever it was. I just talked about something that we talked about during commercial break. And his eyes kind of almost like, are we doing this? And then he responded that way. And in that moment, I think things clicked and we realized how to do it, right? Like, it's not just like, okay, Bob, how's the weather? You know, it's just, it is freezing outside today. You know what I mean? You become a real person. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense, but that's my 2 cents. Okay, so here's another question. This is for you, Mary. It says, do you think SEO training is valuable for sports writers or any reporter in general? What advice would you give to sports journalists regarding new technologies?
Yeah, I definitely think that SEO training is very, very beneficial, just because you want to write stories that are pulling people in, right? You want people.
What is SEO?
SEO is search engine optimization. So it's using things like Google Trends. Sometimes it's using even social media, seeing the things that are trending, and inserting those keywords into your post to get more views. But at the end of the day, it's not only about the views, it's making sure that you have substantial information surrounding that. So I feel like it's definitely a great tool to help pull people in.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah.
What do you mean on Instagram, for example?
So if you type in Google Trends on Google, it'll take you to a site where you can type in any search term, and it'll give you a list of options if you want to look up how long the search has been trending, like whether it's been the last 4 hours, whether it's been 7 days, or kind of the search results that have been coming up over even a year span. You can kind of see the trending topics and words associated with that term. And that's super helpful with SEO writing, because it can be something as simple as a small tweak to your title, switching around the order of the words, March Madness 2023 versus 2023 March Madness.
Wow.
Having the home team versus the away team, or having the away team first versus the home team. Those simple things really, really make a difference in views and clicks. And again, emphasizing just having that substantial information to back it up makes your work so much better.
Wow. Okay, this is a question for you, Joe, from Sailor Betts. Hi, Sailor. Sailor asks, what is one piece of advice that you received during your professional journey to reporting or anchoring at the network level that you wish you knew earlier?
It's a tough one, because there's such a difference between when you work in local news and when you work at the network level. You know, I guess we're going to focus on storytelling since that's what we're talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just give you like what is the most important thing I've ever learned about storytelling, and it applies no matter what you're doing, whether you're turning a story in local news, whether you're anchoring a live interview segment on NBC News now. And that is the importance of focus. Anything you do, try to have a focus statement. This is like the number one thing I preach. If you're going into a story, like the same way, and a lot of you know are in college, that you write a thesis statement for your papers, write a focus statement for your stories. And it should be something kind of specific. So, President Biden went to Ukraine. That's not a very good focus statement. But, the secret mission to get President Biden to Kyiv, that's a more focused story. Or the history of presidents visiting war zones, that's a more focused story. And so when I worked in local news, I didn't fully I knew how to write well. I got to work with great photographers who could edit. I could write a great line. I could get some good sound bites. But I would do stories that weren't focused, and I would go out and interview this person who's there, and then I'd interview that person, and then I'd interview that person. And then I would say, well, I interviewed all these people. No matter what they said, I need to put them all in my story. And so I would do that. And then my story would go in this direction, and then it would go in this direction, and then it would go this direction, because I was letting other people dictate where my story should go instead of walking into the story with a focus and having that dictate who I should talk to, what questions I should ask them, how I should write the story. And so the moment I learned about focus, which was quite a few years into my career, it changed everything, because suddenly I could tell a story that had a very specific approach to it, talking to the people who I needed to talk to, asking the questions I needed to ask, which meant my interview was now 5 minutes long and not 20 minutes long, and writing it in a way that was wrapped completely around my focus. Anything that didn't help my focus, I ignored, got rid of, or didn't bother to shoot in the first place. And it applies to everything we do in this business, no matter what segment you're doing, every story, every day. And so I didn't learn it right away in local news. As I started to master it in local news, I find I carry it over to the network level. And it's the most important thing I teach, and it's the most important thing I've learned.
Ooh, that was good. This is good. Okay, we're going to get into career advice, but I want to ask a question for Elizabeth. This is from Jose Pablo Galvez. Jose says, how do you balance doing both English and Spanish storytelling? Is there a difference?
That's a great question. I think I'll go back to the beginning of what I had said about finding the character in the story, and just making sure that that people identify with that person. As I said, it's about the human in the story, whether it's in Spanish or it's in English. I think, some of the things that were talked about was life experiences; those matter. So, Jose, I imagine you have some life experiences that would help you present that story in a better way for the Latino or general market. So I really think that's the way how you would balance that. At the end of the day, like I said, it's not even about the language. It really is about the person in the story, and how you tug at people's strings and how you help me connect with your story. I hope I answered that. I hope that answered your question well.
Absolutely. We have a question for Janelle, Libby, and Elizabeth. This one says, for the person who is in the field and trying to get to a bigger market or a larger company, what's the one thing they can do to get on the radar of managers and executives?
Listen.
One thing is hard. Oh, go ahead, Elizabeth.
No, I was just gonna say, listen, for me, I don't mind when someone's aggressive and knocking down my door and going on LinkedIn. I mean, it is, you heard the VHS, it's much different. The manila folders, you don't have to do that anymore. You can reach someone, I have so many people reach out to me on LinkedIn, and sometimes I'm like, okay, I've got too many folks. But I mean, I'll give you an example of a reporter who wanted to get to this market, to Philadelphia. She emailed me, found me on LinkedIn, I looked at her reel. I liked her reel, but I wasn't, I was like, all right, let's see. She wanted to come and visit. Finally, she said to me, what do I need to do? Should I just send a carrier pigeon, whatever you need? And I gotta tell you, that caught my attention. And I was like, if she's being like this with me, when I need her to go out and get me that person out in the field, she's going to get it because she was relentless. And then she catered her reel to Philadelphia. So her reel, the content was stories about Philadelphia. And I was like, she wants it. And she wants to be here. And she wants to be at NBC 10. And that's how she caught my attention. Now she's been here for 5 months and she's amazing. And she knows that I share her story because I think it's important for people to know that it is okay to reach out. At least in my case, I don't mind. Reach out. So
I was just going to say, aside from working hard, writing well, when you break news and you have original reporting that no one else has, I think that always gets the attention of a manager. That's the whole secret sauce to getting in there, is the hardworking reporter that gets the scoop, gets the story before everybody else, and brings an original element to any type of story. And the best ones that make it to Joe and Chanel's level are the ones that have done that through their whole career.
That's good. Chanel?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the reach out, but I would just caution that, like, just sending the, like, here's my reel, hire me at NBC, like, the odds of that actually happening are probably like a lightning strike in terms of, like, hitting the network. To Libby's point, you know, a standard reel that here are my 5 live shots, you know, or 3 pieces, it may be solid, is not going to be enough, right? To really get the attention at the network level, you've got to have that outstanding, either like you're an incredibly dynamic reporter in the field that both has the physical, you know, storytelling, movement, great narrative structure with your pieces, outstanding writing, or you're breaking news on a regular way, or you're a real expert on a beat that defines your approach. And we may be looking for a beat reporter at that time who has kind of specialized knowledge or an investigative type. But a general, here's my reel that's kind of solid isn't going to do it. So, you know, I've found that people, you know, like any of us on this call will look at the reels when people send them, but it's just not enough. And be thinking about that body of work. And if you're in a particularly small market, or say a digital outlet, and you want to go from there to here and end up at 30 Rock, rather than trying to shoot right up to 30 Rock, you want to get to the next biggest market or the next biggest platform, or even if it's not the biggest, the next job that's going to put you into a situation where you can become a specialized reporter, or you do get to tell great stories in a way that will make you stand out. So it is all about the work. And we have people who are scouring local markets and digital outlets all the time looking for talent. So you can hit everyone up on LinkedIn, but you got to have the work to back it up.
That's good. This is a good question from Kennedy. We've got about 7 minutes left. I'm a college student and my goal is to be a news producer. What are the most important skills I need to work on so I'm prepared for that line of work?
You want to take it, Libby? All right. I just interviewed 3 people yesterday.
I think good news producers have to do a lot. A good news producer is sort of the center and the hub of all stories. So, you know, the traditional kind of model within television news is the producer is working with the correspondent to help them report out their story. The producer is also working with the technical side, making sure that the crews are in the right location, making sure that they've got a good live shot. They've got to be in touch with the control room. They've got to be in touch with the executive producer. I think we always think about news producers as the center of the wheel. That's sort of in the field. And then, you know, the other side of news producing is being in an edit room or being a segment producer. And you kind of have to touch everything. You have to touch the editorial. You have to touch talent management. You have to touch field productions. So I've always liked being a producer because A, I don't have to put myself on camera, which is great. And B, you kind of are in the center of every story and every report. And so I think a good news producer, is a good multitasker, works quickly, can work on deadline, has the ability to get along with variety of different constituents. That's always going to be the case, and can think quickly on their feet. I think, especially in television news, to be able to pivot and work quickly is really important.
I love that. And I've talked to Libby about this. I feel like, well, not this exact analogy, but like I would want Libby to fly my plane. Like if you have to fly a plane, like I need someone who's like confident, because I can be, and I think sometimes talent, as they say, we have all these other things that we're worried about or we're thinking about, down to the voice, down to what we're wearing, as much as you don't want to admit it, or the craft or our questions. And so you want to be with someone who can be your partner, right? And even at a local level, if there's an anchor sitting down to do her newscast, the reporter in her ear or in his ear, they want to feel like they have a blankie back there, that there's somebody who can fly the ship. And so
I don't want to fly anything, Chanel, but
fly the ship. I just said fly my plane. So yeah, no, you can fly my plane any day, Libby. But no,
I'm gonna throw one in, Chanel, because I've been, the past 3 years since we launched News Now, we've hired over 200 people. And I was just interviewing some PAs because I like to meet everybody before we hire them yesterday. There's a couple of things. If I were in college right now, or as I look at folks who are coming out of college, because we're hiring a lot, master 3 things: editing, shooting, and writing, right? And then obviously the editorial has to run through all of that. But if you come out of university or grad school and you can shoot, or at least have some basic knowledge of, to Libby's point, the technical, the shooting, the editing, and the writing, and those fundamentals, you're going to be a great candidate for any entry level job. And that's very true on the network level. Your answer to what do you read editorially cannot be, I read Twitter. And I will knock that one off your list right now, because that's a no-go. Like, be prepared for those interviews and make sure you're reading everything, because you can't say I hypothetically want to be a news producer, but yet you're not doing the work, right? So,
Janelle, back in the day when I worked with Andrea Mitchell, when people would actually read physical newspapers, even at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, she would have a huge tote bag of every single newspaper that was imaginable. I know she went home and read them all. I can't say enough how reading and looking at a variety of different sources and making sure you're ingesting what's out there about a particular story or topic or whatever it is you're covering is so critical to context, because we haven't talked about that, but context is the heart of storytelling. What happened before? What's going to happen next? What's happening around it? And that comes from reading. I'm so glad you mentioned that, Janelle, because it's critical to what we all do. Producers, reporters, all of us. We've got to be read in. We've got to know what we're talking about.
I love that. That's a sign of a good reporter. You sit down, and that context piece is key. And for me, you can't put your finger on it, or I couldn't at first, but that's what it is. They can say, you know what, that happened back in this city when this happened, or you can't buy that and you can't fake that. That comes from actually knowing your stuff. That's a really good point. Oh my goodness, we're out of time. This has been a really good conversation. I mean, from the craft of journalism, how to actually craft a story, career advice, diversity. My goodness. I hope you guys got what you needed. We tried to get to as many questions as possible. I wish I could hear your applause. So wherever you are, whatever city, at your cubicle, go ahead and applaud, even though we can't hear you. Thanks to our panelists for a great conversation. And thanks to all of you in the audience. By the way, you can visit NBCUacademy.com for more journalism advice and free educational content. It's there for you. And just an announcement coming up at 12:30 Eastern on the main stage, we're going to hear a message from NBC News Chairman Cesar Conde, followed by a one-on-one conversation with Universal Studio Group Chairman Perlina Ibokwe. So don't go away. Take a few minutes to stretch, take a break, but come back and join us on the main stage. To all of our panelists, thank you. This was a phenomenal conversation. Go get them, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, Chanel.
Thank you.